viewer a good understanding of the fascinating world of chess. I am George Merijanian, Program Director of the Wachusett Chess Club at Fitchburg State University. This club meets every Wednesday evening from 7 to 11 in room C-192 in the McKay Complex at the university. And with me today at the Fitchburg Access Television Production Center is our award-winning director, Darren Dame of Fitchburg. He's assisted in the control room by longtime Wachusett Chess Club member Gail Lingner of Fitchburg. Also assisting in the control room is longtime FATV volunteer Andy Hawthorne, who will be handling audio. And behind the camera, following all the action, is another longtime Wachusett Chess Club member, Brian Bigelow, also of Fitchburg. But chess fans, I have the honor today to present you my new co-host, a very accomplished chess player from Westminster, Dave Couture, who is a renowned author, chess author. He has just come out with his second chess book, and I welcome Dave Couture to Chess Chat.
Thank you, George.
Well, Dave, can you tell our Chess Chat fans a little something about you? I know a little things about you, but maybe you could tell our Chess Chat fans something about yourself.
Well, I had joined the club for a year back in the early 80s.
Yes.
When it was at the St. Joseph's Club, and then I came back roughly around the year 2000.
Yes.
And pretty much have been here ever since.
You've been loyal. You've been a loyal
member since, roughly 2000 or so.
And you actually set up our website. You
Right.
actually initiated our beautiful website, which you passed the baton on off to Paul Godin, who's now our webmaster.
Who's done a fantastic job.
And I think our website, the Wachusett Chess Club website, wachusettchess.org, is no doubt, to me, the best chess club website probably in the country. I'll make that claim.
It might be.
Okay.
Especially since Paul has taken over. He's done an incredible job
But again, you took
with
the
it.
initiative to set it up.
I started it, but Paul's really run with it.
Okay. Now, can you tell our viewers something about the book, the books you've written? We did a program. You were here
Right.
2 years ago. Where you were a guest, and it was the title program was "Don't Play Like Me."
Like Me, right? That was going to be the original title of my book.
Yes.
Since then,
What have you? Now you've written another book.
it's just an expanded.
An expanded. Let's show
an expanded
our viewers.
version.
And this is called. What is this book called now?
Progressive Tactics, 1002 Progressively Challenging Chess Tactics. It's just a collection of chess tactics taken from my own games.
Now, how can people get this? This is actually available.
It's available on Amazon.
Okay.
And
so it's good. It's very inexpensive.
Right.
If they can get it actually
Yep.
on Amazon.
And it's available as a Kindle book.
Yes.
So it's right now it's strictly electronic. So if you have a Kindle, you can look at it. But even if you don't, you can just download it to your PC and read it that way.
Oh, wonderful.
And sometime within the next few months, I hope to have a print version of it, because a number of people at the club have been asking for a hard copy of it, because a lot of people aren't that comfortable with.
And aren't you getting?
computers.
Or you told me you're getting some orders from overseas.
It's available worldwide.
Worldwide,
So, yeah.
yes.
So
it's good.
just by
So-
virtue of it being on Amazon, people all over the world can buy it.
Well, I hope this little plug actually increases your
We'll find out.
sales.
We'll
Okay,
find
see. Well, Dave, today I have you as my new co-host because we're going to celebrate or devote this program to an anniversary, a 50th anniversary of a celebrated World Championship match that was held in Moscow, Russia.
Yep.
Now, do you know who was actually world champion 50 years ago in 1966?
In '66, well, it was Petrosian.
Yes, Petrosian. Tigran Petrosian. Actually, most English speakers call him Petrosian.
Petrosian, yeah.
I know him as Tigran Petrosian. But either way, he was the world champion because in 1963, he defeated the reigning champion, Mikhail Botvinnik of Russia.
Okay.
In 1963, when he defeated Botvinnik, 3 years later, he had to defend his title. And you know who his challenger was in 1966?
It was Spassky,
Boris Spassky,
Right.
who went on actually in 1972, who lost to Fischer. But we thought it would be good to dedicate this program to a 50th anniversary because you know what Tigran Petrosian or Petrosian did? He came to Fitchburg. You know,
which I didn't know until you
never
told
knew
me.
that.
Right.
That Tigran Petrosian, the 9th official world champion, was here in Fitchburg on February 26th, 1982, and he gave a simultaneous exhibition where he played many players at the same time at the St. Joseph Club in Cleghorn. That's where the Wachusett Chess Club was meeting back then, during the 80s.
Right.
Yeah. So
now, was that your doing?
Yes, I played a hand, yes, in inviting him. I picked him up at Logan Airport, he and his wife, Rona. She stayed at the Park House. I dropped her off at the Park House in Boston. She didn't want to come out. She's seen so many simultaneous exhibitions. But I drove Tigran along Route 2, you know, and brought him here. And he gave, it was the last Friday in February, and it was a big success. In fact, it was written up big. The Sentinel and Enterprise had a big write-up, both before the simul and after the simul, and it got really big newspaper play. You know, not only in Sentinel and Enterprise, but on the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald. I mean, the New York Times.
How many boards was it?
Oh, I think he probably played 30. He only played about 30 some odd, I think.
Only?
Yeah, because when Bobby Fischer was here in March 1964, he played 56 players.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
At the club, yeah.
Wow.
So anyways, we have chosen the 10th game from the 1966 World Championship match. It was a scheduled 24-game match.
Right.
And Petrosian actually won it. He scored 12 and a half points. They didn't play they did actually 12 and a half to 11 and a half. What does that add up to? That's 23? I think
12 and a half, 11 and a half is 24.
23. 24.
24.
It is 24. All right, so they played all the 24 games, and Petrosian won. He had one more win than Spassky. Petrosian had 4 wins, 3 losses, and 17 draws. Yeah. So a lot of draws in this match. So we're going to show our viewers a very interesting, decisive game, 10th game. This was played on May 2nd, 1966. Yep. And who had white in this game? Who was?
Petrosian.
Yes, Petrosian, right. Petrosian. So what did Petrosian play as his first move? What was his first move here?
Knight F3.
Okay.
This is opening move.
Okay, that's a good move, isn't it?
Just straight development.
Okay, it stops actually Black from playing his king pawn, center pawn to E5.
Yep.
So what Spassky did, he responded with the knight on G8 going to F6. So he's playing symmetrically.
Right.
So what did the Petrosian do?
Petrosian gets ready to fianchetto his bishop.
Okay, so he plays G3. That's the second move.
Yep.
And Spassky follows suit and plays G6. So it looks like both are going for a fianchetto. That is, they're going to place their bishops, you know, along the long diagonals. All right. So what did? And
then Petrosian, before he fianchettos, kind of switches over to the English.
Yeah. Now he could have actually continued with the bishop to G2.
He could have simply
Yeah, but he chose to interpose C4. He could have actually started the game with C4.
Right.
Yeah, and
still come to this
to the same position. Right. All right, but Spassky, third move, he just continues with the development of the bishop to G7. All right, so he's ready to castle. But what did Petrosian do now?
Petrosian does the same.
Bishop G2. Yep. All right. Well, Black says, hey, I castle before you. Right. So he castles. Black castles on the 4th move. Okay. All right, now it's
Petrosian does the same.
Okay, he castles. All right, so now here is where actually Spassky has a number of moves he could play. He could play D6. He could even play C5, keep this symmetrical. Yep. He could even play C6 with the idea of playing D5. I mean, there's a number of good moves, but what Spassky did, he played knight C6. Okay, so he's developing another piece.
Yep.
Okay.
Straight development.
Straightforward development. And what does Petrosian do now?
Petrosian does the same.
Okay, knight C3. All right. All right, so now what Spassky does, he plays D6. That's his 6th move. It does open up for the light squared bishop to come out, if it wants to come out.
Right.
All right, so what does Petrosian do now? Petrosian now, what is he doing?
D4.
All right, now, by a transposition of moves, now, Petrosian could have started the game with D4. That could have been his first move.
Right.
But we have reached actually a position with a name, a defense for Black. You know what this actually defense is called? What black is playing?
Is it a King's Indian?
Yes, this is is known as the King's Indian defense. And you know actually who was enamored of the King's Indian defense?
Fisher?
Fisher. Bobby Fischer loved this defense. This is what his favorite defense against D-pawn openings or closed systems like this. All right, so whose move is it now?
It's black's move.
Oh, it's black's move. Okay, so now it's actually
seventh move.
Seventh move coming up. So what now this is where black could have played the pawn up to e5 if he wanted to.
Right.
He could have brought the rook over if he wanted. But what he did, he played a6. Now what is the purpose of this move? Does this have a meaning? I mean, well, it does have a meaning. This move actually was introduced into tournament play back in the mid-1950s by an Argentine grandmaster by the name of Oscar Roberto Pano. Have you heard the name Pano? Have you heard the name?
I've heard the name.
Okay.
Yep.
And this is known as the Pano variation. The idea is to eventually support the advance of the B pawn, the B5. Of course, in order to do that, we might have to move the rook over to B8 to support the advance. But this was actually in vogue back in the mid-50s, and it caught on in Europe. You know, finally the word got to Europe and Russia that, hey, this is a playable system. All right, so after A6, what did Petrosian do on move 8?
He pushes the D pawn.
All right,
kicking the knight.
So he attacks the knight. So that knight has to move. And what Spassky chose to do, he certainly is not going to go back where he came from, the B8. But what he did is he came over to the side of the board, over to the rim. Knight A5. Now, what does this threaten? Is there a threat here by bringing the knight over to A5?
It's immediately threatening the pawn on C4.
Okay, so the pawn on C4 is under attack. So, by the way, I thought that there's an old adage that, you know, bringing a knight to the side of the board is not to be recommended. You know the old saying? You know the old saying?
Knight on the rim is grim or dim.
Or dim, yes. But it does pose a threat here. So how does Petrosian respond to this threat of the knight attacking that pawn, undefended pawn?
I guess his main choices would have been either pushing the B pawn or pulling the knight back, which is what he did.
So he played knight d2.
Right.
All right, so knight d2 was his 9th move. The knight actually defends now the pawn and also opens up and adds further defense actually for the bishop now.
Right.
To exert more defense of that pawn, which is adequately defended as it is.
Right.
So this is what Spassky did. On his 9th move, he played c5. So he plays his pawn all the way up to c5. Now, what does Petrosian do now on move 10? It's his 10th move.
Queen c2.
Okay. Now, is there a plan? What do you think his plan is here? By putting the queen on c2, is he threatening to do something here?
Is he threatening? I don't know that he's necessarily threatening.
I mean, actually, this is actually, could he possibly follow it up with e4? We actually have the two knights, plus the bishop, supporting the advance of the pawn, but he holds off. He could have actually advanced the pawn immediately if he wanted to, but he chooses to put the queen on c2. In fact, that's the only good move the queen has actually in this position.
Right.
So it's a logical square to put the queen on. All right. So this is where Spassky, move 10, responds with e5. He plays his pawn up to e5 now. All right. So what does Petrosian do now after e5?
Now he gets ready to fianchetto the bishop.
All right, so he adds further defense of the pawn on c4, but he wants to fianchetto the dark squared bishop.
Right. And the fact that the queen's on c2 means that it'll be covering that bishop. So.
Right, it will be you're defending that bishop. Okay. All right, so b3 was played, and now we have, you tell me what you think Spassky's idea is. He plays knight to g4. Now, why is he moving this knight? He hasn't moved this bishop here, or this, but why is he moving now this piece again? Well, he has a plan.
Yeah, and I guess it would be to prepare to push this pawn.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Exactly. To make way for this f pawn to advance to f5.
Right.
And activate, the pawns. Actually, take control of the center here.
Right.
All right. So knight g4 is what Spassky played. Now, what does Petrosian do in response? This is now his 12th move.
No.
Now he plays e4. All right. So e4. But Spassky's plan was to play f5. He plays f7, f5, and he does that.
Right.
All right. So now what does Petrosian do now?
Now he's going to exchange.
Okay, he exchanges. Now, what Spassky did, he didn't recapture that pawn with the bishop, because if he did that, it could easily block. I mean, it could be blocked with a knight. I mean, there's nothing to be gained by taking with the bishop. He wants to utilize these pawns to control the center, so he takes back with the pawn. G takes f5. So that's what he plays. The G pawn takes the f pawn on f5, and now move 14 coming up. Now here is a move
Right.
that you and I, when we looked at this game previously, we said,
I wouldn't have even considered it.
I would never. Yes, neither would I. I look at this and I say,
I would say I'm going to
Yes.
develop my bishop,
I would have
connect my rooks.
yeah, exactly. Or I would have actually maybe attacked that knight,
or kick the knight.
Kick the knight. But this move,
I would
this is
not have even considered this.
no, neither will I. I mean, this is what makes
So,
Petrosian
world champion.
the world champion, the genius that he is. So he brings the knight back to d1, knight d1. All right. So now this gives Spassky an opportunity to now operate on the queen side. He now can play b5. So he plays b5 now because
Right.
it's adequately defended. I mean, he's attacking this pawn, but this pawn on c4 is adequately defended. But
Right.
this pawn, nothing is gained by taking the pawn because it can be taken back with the a pawn. All right, so after b5, move 15 for Petrosian. What does he do?
Now he's going to play f3.
Okay.
So it makes it look like this is what he had been thinking, is
Yeah.
perhaps bringing the knight to there.
Well, now it makes sense. He would like to kick that knight out of there.
Right.
But if this knight were not on d1, this knight on g4 would sink
right.
into e3 and fork
Yes, right.
the queen and the rook.
Right.
So that move, knight d1, now becomes obvious that it actually controls the e3 square and stops the knight from going in there and forking queen and rook.
Right.
All right.
Right.
All right. So now, what does Spassky do after f3? Right.
Yeah.
You would think the knight would retreat.
Would move, right.
You would think the knight would actually retreat maybe back to h6 or maybe back to f6. But you know what Spassky did? He advances the pawn to e4. Now, why does he do this? Why does he leave that knight that's under attack and advance the pawn? Because what's his threat?
His threat is threatening the rook.
He's threatening this bishop to take the rook. And what's that called when you give up? You take a minor piece and you win a major piece. That's called winning the exchange. Well, all right. So what is Petrosian going to do? I'm sorry. What is Petrosian going to do? Right. Yeah. What's going to do? He's got the bishop attacking the rook on a1. So it's very easy to stop that.
Right.
You just.
And that's by virtue of having put the queen here earlier.
Right. Okay. So the bishop goes to b2, and now Spassky takes f3. So he does take the pawn on f3 with the pawn. Okay. Now what does Petrosian do? How does he recapture?
He's got three ways to recapture.
Yes.
The knight, the rook, or the bishop.
3 ways. What's the correct way, according to Petrosian?
According to Petrosian,
Right.
was
He took with the bishop. So bishop takes f3. All right. So now Spassky, the bishop on g7, captures the bishop on b2. Okay. And now that forces him to take with the queen. He's not going to take.
Well, he's not forced to, but.
But the trouble is, if he took with the knight.
Oh, right.
The knight. See that.
Right.
There's a reason why that knight's on d1.
Right.
To control that e3 square. All right. So queen takes.
And the other virtue of it is now the queen's on that long diagonal.
Right. Exactly. All right. So queen takes b2. All right. So now Spassky would like to hold on to that knight. So he sinks back here. Knight goes to e5. Now what's his threat? I see a threat now. I see two threats. You see this pawn on c4?
Right.
How many times is black attacking that pawn?
So black's attacking it 3 times.
3 times. And how many times is it defended?
It's defended twice.
Only twice.
Right.
So there's a threat of actually taking here and winning a pawn here.
Right.
There's also a secondary threat of just taking the knight, taking the bishop, and eliminating the light squared bishop. There's
Right.
2 possible threats here.
Right.
What Petrosian did is what? He doesn't want to lose this pawn, but he also doesn't want to lose the bishop.
Right.
So he just
this takes care of both. And
right.
defends it another time.
Right. He saves the bishop, and the bishop now adds the further defense of the pawn on c4. All right, so bishop e2 is what he played. And this is actually a turning point in the game. Right now, black is doing fine. White is not, crushing, black in any way. But this is where I think computer analysis, I've seen some analysis of this, where the computers, one computer I saw say, just bring this rook on a8 up to a7, lift it, and bring it over. Bring it over, double on the f file, or possibly even bring it to g7, but probably stronger doubling on the f file.
Right.
But what Spassky did, he did this. He played f4. He advances the pawn.
Which is pretty aggressive.
It's pretty aggressive. Wait a minute. Isn't he actually offering a pawn? I mean, wait a minute. The only thing protecting that pawn is the rook.
Right.
But we have two pieces, a rook and a pawn, threatening that pawn.
Right.
So it looks like, for example, that pawn could be won. And what did Petrosian do after Spassky played f4? Did he take this pawn?
He did take it.
He did take it.
He did take it.
And he took it with the pawn. G takes f4. Okay, so G takes f4. Now, what are we doing now? Now, here is where I think Spassky made a mistake. What he should have done here, and if we go on the board, if we get the camera actually on this position, here is where Spassky could have played. He could have played rook takes f4, right? And,
right.
And then
if white takes
back, black can play queen to g5 check, and he's going to recapture the rook. Right, exactly.
Yep.
So that's actually what Spassky should have played. Okay, so the pawn is here, but what he did instead, and I can understand why he played f4 in the first place, so he could actually allow the bishop to come down to h3 and attack the rook. Okay, right. So what is Petrosian doing here? Bishop is on h3, attacking the rook. We have the move 21 coming up for white, and this, to me, is probably the most brilliant move of the game. I mean,
again, it's
neither you or I would consider trying to save our rook by moving it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to move the rook over
or stay on the file. Yes, right.
Yeah.
But this move by Petrosian is so amazing that this makes him, a genius. What he played was
plays knight e3.
Knight e3. Wow.
Allowing.
Exactly. And Spassky did not hesitate at all when he saw that move. He took the bishop and captured the rook on f1. So he's won the exchange.
Right.
He's won a rook for a bishop. All right, so now what is Petrosian doing now? How does he recaptures with the rook. So now he has all right, so now with this rook, he is now threatening to take this piece, right?
Right.
All right, so this piece on e5 has to move, so he has to retreat it. And what he did, Spassky, he played knight g6. That was his 22nd move. And by the way, by retreating the knight and the rook are now attacking this pawn on f4, which is only defended by the rook.
Right.
All right, now what does Petrosian do on his 23rd move? Now this is another incredible move. We would think about, for example, maybe trying to maybe advance the pawn.
Right, save the pawn.
Save the pawn.
That would be my first instinct.
Yes.
My pawn's tacked twice. I would think I'd want to save it, but
okay. But Petrosian instead played that
g4, which doesn't immediately do anything.
Right. So, but this is what Spassky, when he saw this move, bishop g4, said, "Wait a minute, I'm going to win this pawn. I'm going to take this pawn with the knight. Knight takes f4. That's what he did. Okay. And what did Petrosian do now?
He's going to give up another exchange.
He He gives because now Spassky responded with rook take. He says, doesn't he take here?
Yep.
He takes rook takes f4, and now he has won 2 exchanges. Spassky is 2 rooks ahead. Petrosian's given up 2 minor pieces for this.
Right.
All right. So where do we stand now?
But this is the critical thing here is bishop to e6 check.
Check.
So now he's got this diagonal and this diagonal.
Right. Exactly. Right. All right. So what he does here, he realizes
really he has no choice.
He comes back and blocks the check with this rook. Rook f7. So he plays rook f7.
Right.
That was his move. Now it's the 26th move coming up for Petrosian. What does he do?
He's going to bring in the knight to assist with the attack.
So now he's using his forces, his minor pieces. He's coordinating these minor pieces, knight e4. And this is where Spassky realizes he's got to try to see counterplay here. He plays the queen on d8, which he has to move the whole game.
Right.
And it comes out to h4. Here, on h4, the queen, isn't the queen attacking this undefended knight on e4? All right.
Yep.
So what does Petrosian do now? He's got a knight under attack. So what he does is
takes the pawn
on
D6.
move 27, he just snaps the pawn on d6, and now we have 2 minor pieces attacking this rook. He's threatening actually to get rid of that rook,
which is pinned.
That's pinned. So so now is, I believe, after he did the knight takes the d6, Spassky went queen g5 and attacks his check of the king.
Right.
And also attacking the knight.
Attacking the knight.
Right. All right. So what does Petrosian do now?
Just slides the king aside.
Right. King goes. Yeah. It looks dangerous to be in the corner like this, especially when you have a queen on this file and a rook on this file. It looks very dangerous to have the king on h1.
But that rook is pinned, so it's not going anywhere.
Okay. And this is where Spassky realizes he has to come to the defense of this rook.
Right.
So he brings this rook. This rook comes to a7. Rook a7. Can't move this rook over to a7 because it's pinned, but he can move this rook on a8 to a7 and add a further defender to this rook on f7. All right. Now what happens now? So it's the 29th move for white, and he captures with check. Bishop takes f7, the rook f7 check, and Spassky retakes. Rook takes f7. Okay, and now what do we see here? Now we see a beautiful.
Now, yeah, the question is, can a viewer?
Now, actually, let's look at the position. Can the people see that? Now, if you move your leg a bit, maybe they can see it. Okay. Yep. Oh, they got a good view. All right. Look at this position. Now, can our viewers see what forced Spassky to resign this game immediately after Petrosian's next move? We'll give them
5 seconds.
Only 5 seconds. Yeah, right. We're not too generous with our time, are we? All right. This is what. Well, tell our viewers what Petrosian played here.
So the winning move.
What is the winning move here?
If you haven't seen it, which is a pretty amazing move, is queen h8 check.
Which queen h8 check, forcing Spassky's resignation because he did not want to face this. He did not want to see king takes.
It's his only move.
h8, and this would allow knight takes f7, rook check.
Forking.
The king has to move. Say the king moves to g7, and now the knight takes on g5, and he's a full piece up. With a pawn majority on the queen side, with a full piece, a knight, and 4 pawns versus 3. This is an easy win. Even for a not so skilled player. Even a beginner might win this. So, chess fans, we hope you enjoyed the game that Dave Couture and I presented to you. We hope you join us next time for another fascinating game on the next episode of Chess Chat. See you then.